Hi everyone, and thanks for watching my online lesson on the quadratic formula. So this is a higher tier only topic, and it's one of three ways we have of solving a quadratic. We can factorise, we can complete the square, and we can use the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is normally used when the other two options become too difficult or if it won't factorise, and this is normally when we have a calculator. It gives you a clue in the question. It wants you to use the quadratic formula, often by saying give your solutions to 2 decimal places or 3 significant figures. It means we're going to get difficult answers. So the first thing we have to do is we have to know what the quadratic formula is. They don't give you this on formula sheets anymore, and they don't provide it in the question. So we need to be able to memorise it. And this is the quadratic formula. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and this is all over 2a. And a, b and c are the coefficients of our x squared, our x, and our constant at the end. So we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. It's very important that your quadratic equals 0 before you can use the quadratic formula. So in this example, I'm going to write down my values of a, b and c first. So in this one, a is 3, b is 7, and c is minus 13. Just be careful there, it's minus 13, not 13. So the first mark we get is just from rewriting this with those values plugged in. It's a very easy first mark. It's just memorising the quadratic formula that's the hard part. So I've got x equals minus 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times minus 13 all over 2 times 3. And that gets us our first mark. Now you can type this in your calculator as it is, and you will get the right answers. You need to type it in once with a plus here, and then type it in again, but this time with a minus. And that gives you your 2 answers for x. But this is hard to type in as it is. It's easy to make a mistake. And you do get a second mark of working out for simplifying this first. If you type it in wrong, you make a mistake, you'll only get 1 mark for this working out. So it is worth just doing a little bit of simplifying first. So I have x equals minus 7 plus or minus, and we can simplify what's underneath this square root. I've got 7 squared, which is 49, minus, and then 4 times 3 times minus 13 is minus 156 all over 6, and then I can just go one step further with what I have under this square root. Minus 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 156 is 205 all over 6. So now that gets me 2 marks for my working out if I don't get the answer correct, and it just makes it much easier to type into your calculator. So typing this in twice, once with a plus and once with a minus, I get 2 answers. One is 1.22 to 2 decimal places, and the other is minus 3.55. I would just try typing this in your calculator yourself now just to check that you're comfortable typing this in. Okay, these questions can get a little bit more tricky, and they actually get more difficult when the value of b is a negative one, like in this example here, and I'll show you why. So as before, I'm just going to write out what a, b and c are. So a in this one is, I only have 1x squared, so it's 1. It's not 0. B is minus 5, and this is why this one's a tricky example. And C is minus 8. So let's look at what happens and why this is more difficult. So writing out my formula first, x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then writing in my values, I have minus b. Well, b is minus 5, so this is minus 5. Plus or minus the square root, and then under here I need to put b squared. So b squared is minus 5 squared, which means minus 5 times minus 5, which is positive 25. If you write down here under this square root minus 5 squared like this, your calculator will use BIDMAS and it will do the 5 squared first, which gives you 25, and then it'll add the minus in front of it and it gives you the wrong answer. So we need to make sure that we put the minus 5 in a bracket and then put the squared. So the calculator knows we want to do the minus 5 squared. So that's why this is a little bit trickier. And then I'm going to do minus 4 times A times C, and that's all over 2A. Now, as before, if I want to bank an extra mark for working out, just in case I type it in my calculator wrong, which with ones like this is very highly likely, there's a lot of things to type in, I'm going to just simplify a little bit. So minus 5 just means 5, plus or minus the square root. Minus 5 squared is positive 25, minus 4 times 1 times minus 8 is minus 32, all over 2, so this is 5 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 2. So that's banked me a second mark and it's made it much easier to type in my calculator. So the two answers I get, and this time it wants 3 significant figures, are 6.27 and minus 1.27. Here's a question for you to try. It is a more difficult one because we have a minus value for our b, and it has got some larger numbers in, but that doesn't make it any more difficult because you have a calculator to help you. It's more the minus value in front of the b that we have to be careful of. So pause the video and unpause when you're ready to see the solutions. Here's the solution. Just check that you've got your minus 17 in brackets here where it's squared, and you've got minus 17 here, and then I've skipped a step here, I've gone straight to the fully simplified version, that you've got this written down, and then these are your two answers rounded to 3 significant figures. Here's how using the quadratic formula can just get one step harder. And this is when someone has already substituted values into the quadratic formula and fully simplified it, and then they're asking you to work backwards to find out what A, B and C were. So this is an example here. The fully simplified version is x equals 8 plus or minus 2 root 7 all over 6. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write out the quadratic formula just to the side so I can compare it with this simplified version. So the quadratic formula is x equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the first bit we're going to look at is we're going to find what a is. Now a is quite easy to find out. we know that at the bottom of the quadratic formula we have 2a, and here we have 6. So 2a must equal 6. So a must be 3. So that's 1 mark. It's quite easy to find out what a is. Similar for b, we know that at the beginning here of the numerator we have minus b, and here we have 8. So minus b is 8, which means that b must be minus 8. So that's another mark. It's finding c that is the really tricky bit. Now we see the only time that c appears is underneath this square root here. This is where c is. So we must do something with this bit and comparing it to this bit here. So I'm going to write that out first, that the square root of b squared minus 4ac equals 2 root 7. And now we've got to find out what c is from this. So I know that b squared is 64 because I figured out what b is. Minus 4 times a is 12. I don't know what c is yet, but I know this bit here must be 12c. And that equals... Now if I'm going to be able to compare these properly, I need 2 root 7 under all of one square root. So 2 is equivalent to root 4, so I have root 4 root 7, which is root 28. So I can rewrite this as root 28. And now I can compare what's underneath these square roots. I have 64 minus 12c equals 28. And this is just an equation that I need to solve. So take away 64 from both sides. Minus 12c equals minus 36. And divide both sides by minus 12, I find that c is 3. And that's the answer. I've seen these questions crop up a couple of times now. This is a more difficult example because I had to deal with that 2 root 7 and, calculating with surds. So it's worth revising, especially if you're aiming for one of our top grades, how to work backwards from the quadratic formula. Thank you for watching.